There are nights that don't feel like nights at all. They feel like the world has stopped pretending everything is okay. Grace remembers that night not because anything dramatic happened at first, but because nothing did. The house was quiet in a way that felt unfamiliar. Daniel had fallen asleep on the couch, still holding a half-finished cup of tea gone cold hours ago. The television was on but muted, casting flickering light across the living room walls. Outside the rain had stopped. Even the wind seemed to have left. Everything was still. Too still. Grace stood in the hallway for a long time without moving. The house was dark except for the faint light spilling from the kitchen clock. 2:13 a.m. She walked slowly, barefoot, as if sound itself might break something fragile inside her. She didn't know where she was going at first. Only that staying still hurt more than moving. The nursery door was ahead of her. Still painted yellow. Still unchanged. Still waiting. She hadn't opened it in months. Maybe longer. Her hand hovered over the doorknob. She didn't turn it. Not yet. Instead, she leaned her forehead against the wood. And for the first time in a long time, she let herself remember everything she had been trying not to remember. Not the happy parts. Not the hopeful parts. The other ones. The hospital rooms. The quiet phone calls. The empty arms. The silence after prayers that never came back the way she expected. Her breathing grew uneven. She whispered without realizing she was speaking out loud. I can't keep doing this. The words didn't sound dramatic. They sounded exhausted. Like something that had been said inside her heart 1,000 times before it ever reached her lips. She finally opened the door. The room smelled faintly of paint and dust. Nothing had changed. That somehow made it worse. The crib still stood in the corner, half-assembled and never used. Tiny folded clothes sat in a drawer she couldn't bring herself to empty. A stuffed bear sat on the rocking chair, facing the wall as if waiting for someone who was running late. Grace stepped inside and closed the door behind her. Not with force. Just gently. As if even the sound of a closing door might disturb something sacred and broken. She sat on the floor, her back against the wall. And for a long time she didn't cry. She just stared at everything she had once hoped for. Then she finally spoke. Not to anyone visible. Not even to herself. God. Her voice cracked. If you're still there. A long pause. Her fingers pressed into the carpet. I don't know how to keep pretending I'm okay. Silence answered. As it always had lately. But this time, something inside her stopped waiting for it to change. She reached into the pocket of her robe and pulled out something she had been hiding without fully realizing why she still kept it. A notebook, thin, worn at the edges. Inside were pages she had filled over weeks. Not prayers. Not devotionals. Just truth. Raw sentences she had never said out loud. I feel forgotten. I don't recognize myself anymore. I don't think I'm strong. I think I'm tired. I don't know how much longer I can stay like this. Her handwriting grew messier the further she turned the pages. As if even writing had started to lose meaning. At the very last page, there was a line she had written but never finished. She stared at it for a long time. Her hand trembled slightly as she picked up the pen again. And slowly, she began to write. Not a prayer. Not a hope. A goodbye. We will not read all of it. We don't need to. Just enough. Her voice returns as narration while we see fragments of the page. If anyone reads this, I'm sorry. I tried to be strong. I really did. I don't think I was ever meant to carry pain like this for so long. The pen stopped for a moment. Her hand hovered above the paper, as if something inside her was still undecided. Then she wrote one final line. Smaller. Almost unreadable. Tell Daniel I loved him more than I knew how to show. She placed the pen down, and for the first time, she didn't immediately cry, because something inside her felt strangely settled. Not peaceful. Not healed. Just decided. She folded the paper carefully, placed it beside the notebook, and stood up. Her reflection in the dark window looked unfamiliar. Not broken. Not dramatic. Just gone a little too quiet. She turned off the light, walked to the bedroom. Daniel was still asleep. She stood beside him for a long time, watching him breathe, memorizing something she didn't know she was saying goodbye to. Then she whispered something so softly it barely existed. I'm sorry. And she walked out of the room. She didn't know how she ended up sitting at the edge of the bed in the guest room. The house felt larger than it had ever felt before. Too many empty spaces. Too many silent corners. She held the letter in her hands. And this time, there was no more arguing inside her thoughts. No more back and forth. Just stillness. Final stillness. She closed her eyes and let out a breath she had been holding for years. Then, a sound. At first she thought she imagined it. A knock. Soft, uncertain. From the front door. She didn't move. The house stayed quiet. Then it came again. 3 knocks. This time closer. Real. Grace opened her eyes slowly, and for the first time that night, something interrupted the silence she had accepted as final. She stood, not because she felt ready, but because something inside her had reacted before she could stop it. She walked down the hallway, step by step, the letter still in her hand. The knock came again just as she reached the door. She hesitated, her hand on the handle, her breath unsteady, and then she opened it. Grace opened the door slowly, not because she expected anything, but because something inside her no longer had the strength to resist what came next. The porch light flickered faintly in the night air. For a moment there was nothing. Just darkness. Just wind. Just the quiet after a decision that felt irreversible. Then she saw her. A woman. Older. Small in frame. Standing close to the edge of the porch like she wasn't sure she was allowed to be there. A thin shawl wrapped around her shoulders, as if she had left her house in a hurry without thinking about the cold. Grace didn't speak. Neither did the woman at first. They just looked at each other. Like 2 strangers who somehow recognized something in the other they couldn't explain. Finally, the woman broke the silence. Her voice was gentle. Almost apologetic. "I'm sorry, it's late." Grace blinked slowly. Do I know you?" The woman hesitated. Then shook her head. "No." Pause. Then she added something softer. "But I think I was supposed to come here tonight." Something in those words made Grace's chest tighten. Not fear. Not confusion. Something else. Something quieter. The woman glanced past Grace into the dim hallway. "I saw your light from the street." She gave a small, uncertain smile. "And I couldn't stop thinking about it." Grace didn't understand what that meant. Not yet. Behind her, in her hand, the letter still rested. Heavy in a way paper should never feel. She became suddenly aware of it. As if the woman on the porch might somehow see it without being told. The woman shifted slightly. "I know this is strange." Her voice softened further. "But I've been driving around for hours." Grace frowned faintly. "Why?" The woman looked down at her hands. And when she spoke again, her voice cracked just enough to reveal the truth underneath. "Because I didn't know if I was going to make it through tonight." The words didn't land immediately. They just hung in the air between them. "So, sure. Real." Grace's breath caught. Something inside her reacted before her mind could catch up. The woman continued quickly, almost afraid she had said too much. "I know that sounds dramatic. I didn't know where else to go." A shaky breath. "I passed your house earlier when I was driving." She hesitated, then added quietly. "I saw the light on." She looked up again. "I don't know why, but I kept thinking, maybe I should stop." Silence. Not empty silence. Heavy silence. The kind that carries 2 breaking lives at once. Grace didn't move. Didn't speak. The letter in her hand suddenly felt heavier. Not because of what it said, but because of what it meant. The woman wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have come here like this." She took a step back. "I'll go. Grace spoke for the first time. "Wait." The woman stopped. Grace didn't fully understand why she said it. Only that something inside her refused to let the moment pass. The woman looked up, and for the first time, really looked at Grace. Not politely. Not quickly. But carefully. As if she was noticing something she hadn't seen before. Grace swallowed. "I think," she began slowly. Her voice trembled. "I think you're supposed to be here." The woman's eyes filled instantly. Not because she understood, but because she didn't feel alone anymore. Grace stepped back from the doorway, and after a pause that felt like it contained everything she had almost done, she opened the door wider. "Come in." The woman hesitated, just for a second. Then she stepped inside. The house felt different now, not because anything had changed, but because someone else was inside it. They sat in the living room. Neither of them turned on bright lights. Just a small lamp. Soft, warm, human. The woman kept her hands folded tightly in her lap. Grace still held the letter. Neither of them spoke for a while. Then the woman whispered, "I don't even know your name." Grace looked at her. A faint, tired smile. "Grace." The woman nodded slightly. I'm Hannah. Another pause. Then Hannah added, barely audible. I don't think I've ever told anyone this out loud, but I don't want to be here anymore. The words didn't shock Grace. They didn't need to, because something about them felt familiar. Too familiar. Like hearing an echo of her own voice from another life. Grace looked down at the letter in her hand. Then slowly, she set it on the table. Hannah noticed it. What's that? Grace didn't answer immediately. Her fingers hovered over it. Then she said quietly, a reminder. Hannah frowned slightly. A reminder of what? Grace looked at her. And for the first time that night, her voice steadied. That I almost didn't stay. Silence filled the room again. But this time it wasn't empty. It was shared. Grace reached forward slowly and placed the envelope she had carried for 32 years on the table between them. Hannah stared at it, confused, unsure. Grace spoke softly. I wrote that on a night I thought my story was over. A breath. But someone knocked on my door. Hannah didn't speak. She couldn't. Grace continued. And I'm only here because I opened it. Her eyes glistened. So I think, she said gently, tonight might be one of those nights again. Hannah finally looked up. What do you mean? Grace swallowed hard. And for the first time in decades, she said the truth without hiding it behind strength. I think you knocked on the door for a reason. Hannah's hands began to shake. Tears formed but didn't fall yet. I almost didn't come, she whispered. Grace nodded slowly. I know. Pause. Then Grace added something quieter. But you did. And in that moment, something invisible shifted in the room. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough for two people who had been standing at the edge of silence to realize they were no longer standing alone.
Don't miss the season finale tomorrow, Sunday at 9 p.m. on Unknown Speaker, Real Testimonies. Thank you for listening and for being part of this journey. See you tomorrow.